Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases in recorded Missouri history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a comment about where you're watching from and the exact time you heard this story. We're interested in knowing where and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach people around the world. In the autumn of 1893, deep within the Ozark wilderness of southern Missouri, two experienced trappers embarked on what should have been a routine expedition. What they discovered in those dense woodlands would challenge every assumption about human nature and the lengths to which desperation can drive a person. This is not a tale of supernatural occurrences or unexplained phenomena, but rather a methodical examination of documented evidence that reveals something far more unsettling: the capacity for ordinary people to cross lines that should never be crossed. The Missouri State Archives contain a collection of documents from the Crawford County Sheriff's Office dating to the winter of 1893. Among these yellowed papers, filed under Unresolved Investigations, lies the case file of Ezekiel Thornfield and Matthias Crane. Both men were seasoned trappers, well known throughout the region for their expertise in navigating the treacherous terrain of what would later become the Mark Twain National Forest. These were men accustomed to spending months in isolation, living off the land and the pelts they could gather during the lucrative winter trapping season. Thornfield, at 34 years of age, had been working these woods since he was barely 18. Born in the small settlement of Cuba, Missouri, he had learned the trapper's trade from his father, who had himself spent decades working the waterways and ridges of the Ozark Mountains. Neighbors described Thornfield as a methodical man, someone who approached his work with the careful planning of a military campaign. He maintained detailed maps of trap lines, recorded weather patterns and animal behavior, and had developed a reputation for returning from expeditions with consistently profitable loads of pelts. Matthias Crane presented a different personality entirely. Older than his partner at 39, Crane had come to Missouri from Pennsylvania in 1885, following reports of abundant fur-bearing animals in the Ozark region. Unlike Thornfield, who had inherited both his profession and his territory, Crane was an innovator, constantly seeking new techniques and unexplored areas that might yield superior results. Local trappers respected his expertise, but found him somewhat unpredictable, prone to abandoning proven methods in favor of experimental approaches that sometimes led to spectacular successes and occasionally to complete failures. The partnership between Thornfield and Crane had developed over 3 seasons of working adjacent trap lines. Initially competitors, they had discovered that their different approaches to the trade complemented each other effectively. Thornfield's methodical planning provided stability and consistent results, while Crane's willingness to explore new territories and techniques opened opportunities that neither man could have achieved independently. By the autumn of 1893, they had established a routine of working together during the most productive months of the trapping season, combining their catches and sharing both the risks and the profits of extended expeditions into the remote areas of the Ozark wilderness. The initial police report, dated November 15, 1893, states that the men had been missing for approximately 3 weeks. Their families had grown concerned when neither man returned to their respective homes in Cuba, Missouri, by their agreed-upon date of October 25th. Both men were married and had established clear patterns regarding their expeditions. Thornfield's wife, Cordelia, told investigators that her husband had never been late returning from a trapping expedition by more than 2 days, and that he always sent word ahead if weather or other circumstances were likely to delay his return. Crane's wife, Beatrice, provided a similar account to the authorities. She described her husband as someone who planned his expeditions with military precision, calculating provisions, timing, and expected yields weeks in advance. According to her testimony, Crane had been particularly excited about this expedition, believing that he and Thornfield had identified an area of the forest that had remained largely unexplored by other trappers. He had told her that they expected to return with the most profitable load of pelts either man had ever secured. The families had initially assumed that early winter weather might have delayed the men's return. The autumn of 1893 had brought several severe storms to the Ozark region, with heavy snows falling earlier than usual. However, as the days passed without any word from the trappers, and as other men working the same general area returned to their homes on schedule, concern turned to alarm. By early November, both families were pressing local authorities to organize a search expedition. The search party that eventually located their camp was led by Deputy Sheriff Augustus Vail, a man who had spent most of his 38 years in the Crawford County backcountry and was widely regarded as one of the most skilled woodsmen in the region. Vail assembled a team of 8 experienced hunters and trackers, men familiar with the specific area where Thornfield and Crane had planned to work. The search party departed Cuba on November 10, 1893, carrying provisions for a week-long expedition and equipped with the best available maps of the region. According to Deputy Vail's official report, the search team spent 2 days working their way through the maze of ridges and valleys that characterized the Thornfield-Crane expedition area. The terrain was challenging even for experienced woodsmen, with dense undergrowth, steep ravines, and numerous creek crossings that could become impassable during periods of heavy rain. The searchers found several old campsites that showed evidence of recent use, but none that could be definitively linked to the missing trappers. On the morning of November 12th, the search party discovered what appeared to be a regularly maintained trail leading deeper into the wilderness than any of the searchers had previously explored. The trail showed clear signs of recent use, with broken branches and disturbed ground indicating that people had been moving along this route within the past few weeks. Following this trail for approximately 3 miles, the search party arrived at a natural clearing in a hollow that local hunters referred to as Devil's Kettle. The clearing itself was unremarkable, a roughly circular open space perhaps 50 yards across, surrounded by dense stands of oak and hickory trees. What made it notable was the presence of an obviously well-established camp, complete with a carefully constructed lean-to shelter, an elaborate fire pit surrounded by seating made from arranged logs, and various pieces of equipment that clearly indicated long-term occupation. Most significant was the fire pit itself, which contained not cold ashes, but glowing embers that suggested someone had been tending the fire very recently. Deputy Vail's report describes approaching the camp with considerable caution, calling out repeatedly to announce the search party's presence, and to request that any occupants identify themselves. When no response came, the searchers moved closer to examine the camp more thoroughly. What they found defied easy explanation and would form the foundation for one of the most puzzling missing person cases in Missouri history. The camp was meticulously organized, displaying the kind of attention to detail that experienced trappers developed over years of wilderness living. The lean-to shelter was constructed with obvious skill, using locally available materials but assembled with techniques that demonstrated considerable expertise. The structure was weatherproof, well ventilated, and spacious enough to accommodate 2 people comfortably. Inside the shelter, the searchers found 2 bedrolls arranged on platforms of woven branches that kept them off the ground and provided insulation from the cold earth. Personal belongings were organized with military precision. 2 rifle cases leaned against the back wall of the shelter, each containing a well-maintained weapon and an adequate supply of ammunition. Clothing was folded and stored in canvas bags that protected it from moisture. Cooking equipment was cleaned and arranged near the fire pit, with provisions stored in sealed containers designed to prevent spoilage and to discourage raids by forest animals. Most significantly, the searchers discovered a collection of pelts that represented weeks of successful trapping. The furs were properly cleaned and stretched, indicating that whoever had been working this area possessed the skills necessary to preserve their catch for eventual sale. The quantity and quality of the pelts suggested that the camp's occupants had been extraordinarily successful in their trapping efforts, far exceeding what most trappers could expect to accomplish during a similar period. Deputy Vale noted in his report that everything about the camp suggested normal, successful trapping operations. The equipment was well maintained, the provisions were adequate, and the accumulated pelts represented significant monetary value. Nothing indicated struggle, hasty departure, or any kind of emergency that might explain why the camp's occupants would abandon their valuable possessions and disappear into the wilderness. The mystery deepened when the search party discovered that the camp contained personal items that definitely belonged to Thornfield and Crane. Cordelia Thornfield identified her husband's distinctive hunting jacket, a garment she had modified with additional pockets specifically for carrying trapping supplies. Beatrice Crane recognized her husband's pipe and tobacco pouch, items he carried on every expedition and would never have left behind voluntarily. Among the abandoned possessions, the searchers found a leather-bound journal that belonged to Ezekiel Thornfield. The journal contained entries dating from the beginning of the expedition on September 30th through the final entry dated November 8th, just 4 days before the search party discovered the abandoned camp. These entries would provide the most detailed information available about the trappers' final weeks and would reveal a progression of events that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of their experience in the wilderness. The early entries in Thornfield's journal paint a picture of a highly successful expedition. His first few weeks of writing describe excellent hunting conditions, favorable weather, and the kind of productive partnership that both men had hoped to achieve. Thornfield writes enthusiastically about their decision to explore territory that neither man had worked before, following reports from other trappers about abundant beaver populations in the remote valleys beyond the established hunting grounds. September 30th entry reads, "Weather clear and cold, perfect for the season." Matthias suggests we push further east than either of us has been before. The old-timers in town spoke of beaver dams in the headwaters of Little Piney Creek that have never been properly worked. If we can locate these sites, this could be our most profitable season yet. October 3rd. Found what we were looking for. Matthias was right about the beaver population. Discovered 3 separate dam complexes within 2 miles of our camp. Animals appear to be undisturbed by human activity, likely because few trappers venture this deep into the hills. Set our first trap line today. If the rest of the territory proves equally productive, we will return home with more pelts than we can carry. The entries from early October describe the establishment of their routine and the gradual expansion of their trapping operations. Thornfield notes that Crane had developed an innovative approach to trap placement that took advantage of the natural geography of the area to funnel animals into positions where they could be captured efficiently. The technique required more initial labor than traditional methods, but promised significantly higher yields over the course of their expedition. October 8th. Matthias has outdone himself with the trapline design. His understanding of how water flows through this valley system has allowed us to predict exactly where the animals will travel. We are catching twice what I would normally expect in territory this rich. At this rate, we will have enough pelts to justify staying an extra week beyond our original schedule. However, by mid-October, subtle changes begin to appear in Thornfield's writing. While the trapping continued to be successful, he begins to mention aspects of their situation that caused him some concern. The first hints of trouble appear in his entry for October 12th, where he notes that Crane had begun exploring areas of the forest that seemed to have no relevance to their trapping operations. October 12th. Matthias spent most of yesterday investigating what he claims are unusual rock formations about a mile north of our camp. I examined the area myself and can see nothing remarkable about it, but he insists there are signs of previous human activity. He has found what he believes are stone tools and evidence of old fire pits. I told him that Indian camps are not uncommon in these hills, but he seems convinced that what he has discovered is somehow different. The entries from this period reveal a growing tension between the two men's approaches to their expedition. While Thornfield remained focused on their stated objective of accumulating pelts, Crane was becoming increasingly distracted by what he characterized as archaeological discoveries. Thornfield's writing suggests frustration with his partner's divided attention and concern that these distractions might interfere with their trapping operations. October 15th. Found Matthias this morning examining what he claims are carved symbols on a boulder near the creek. Spent 2 hours looking at the rock myself and can see nothing but natural weathering patterns. When I suggested we focus on checking our trap lines, he became defensive and accused me of lacking intellectual curiosity. This is not like him. Matthias is normally as focused on practical matters as I am. By late October, Thornfield's journal entries reveal that Crane's behavior had become increasingly erratic. Rather than participating in their normal trapping routine, Crane was spending entire days exploring areas that seemed to have no connection to their work. More troubling, he was beginning to make claims about his discoveries that Thornfield found difficult to believe. October 18th. Matthias returned to camp today carrying what he insists are tools made by people who lived in these hills long before any Indian tribes we know about. The items appear to be nothing more than ordinary stones to me, but he is convinced they show evidence of sophisticated craftsmanship. He speaks of finding caves that contain evidence of human habitation, but he refuses to show me these locations, says I would not understand the significance of what he has discovered. The journal entries from the final week of October show Thornfield's growing alarm about his partner's mental state. Crane's preoccupation with his alleged archaeological discoveries had escalated to the point where he was neglecting basic camp maintenance and ignoring the trap lines entirely. More disturbing, he had begun making statements that suggested his grip on reality might be loosening. October 22nd. Matthias claims that the people who left the artifacts he has been finding were not ordinary human beings. He speaks of tools that show impossible precision, of cave paintings that depict events that could not have been witnessed by primitive people, of evidence that these ancient inhabitants possessed knowledge that modern science cannot explain. I fear that the isolation is affecting his mind. October 25th. This was the day we planned to begin our return journey, but Matthias refuses to leave. He says we cannot abandon what he has discovered, that the world must know about the evidence he has uncovered. When I reminded him of our responsibilities to our families, he became angry and accused me of being willing to sacrifice scientific discovery for mere profit. We are now 3 days past our planned departure date. The entries for late October reveal that the partnership between Thornfield and Crane had deteriorated completely. Crane's obsession with his discoveries had consumed all of his attention, while Thornfield found himself managing the camp alone and growing increasingly concerned about their ability to return home safely before severe winter weather made travel impossible. October 28th. Matthias has been absent from camp for 2 days. He left early yesterday morning, carrying his pack and promising to show me definitive proof of his claims when he returned. Found myself alone in camp, tending the fire and checking trap lines by myself. Weather is turning colder, and I fear we may be trapped here by snow if we do not leave soon. When Crane finally returned to camp, according to Thornfield's journal, his behavior had become even more disturbing. The journal entry for October 29th describes a man who appeared to have been profoundly affected by whatever he had discovered during his absence from their base camp. October 29th. Matthias returned at dawn carrying a canvas bundle that he guards jealously. He claims to have found a cave system that extends deep into the hills, with chambers that show evidence of habitation by people whose level of development exceeded anything we associate with the native tribes of this region. He speaks of finding preserved artifacts, cave paintings that depict astronomical events, and evidence of metallurgy that should not have existed in this part of the world. Thornfield's description of his partner's condition suggests that Crane had been severely shaken by his experience. The journal notes that Crane appeared exhausted, as though he had not slept during his 2-day absence, and that he seemed reluctant to provide specific details about what he had discovered. When pressed for more information, Crane would only say that some knowledge was too dangerous to share without proper preparation. October 30th. Attempted to convince Matthias that we must begin our journey home immediately. Weather reports from the south suggest that severe storms are moving into our area. If we do not leave within the next few days, we risk being trapped here until spring. Matthias agrees that departure is necessary, but he insists on making one final expedition to the cave system he has discovered. Says he must retrieve additional evidence before we can safely reveal what we have learned. The journal entries for early November show Thornfield's growing desperation as weather conditions continued to deteriorate and his partner's behavior became increasingly irrational. Crane had become secretive about his activities, leaving camp for extended periods without explanation and returning with additional artifacts that he refused to allow Thornfield to examine closely. November 2nd. Snow beginning to fall heavily, temperature dropping rapidly. Checked our route back to Cuba and found that several creek crossings are already becoming dangerous due to ice formation. If we do not leave within the next 2 days, we will be forced to remain here until weather conditions improve. Matthias seems unconcerned about our situation, claims that what he has discovered is worth any risk. See November 4th. Matthias revealed the contents of the bundle he has been guarding. The artifacts appear to be made from metals I do not recognize, worked with a precision that suggests tools far more sophisticated than anything I have ever seen. More disturbing are the cave paintings he has copied. The images depict events and creatures that I cannot identify, rendered with an artistic skill that seems impossible for primitive people. The journal entry for November 5th marks a turning point in Thornfield's account. Up to this point, despite his concerns about Crane's behavior, Thornfield had maintained his skepticism about his partner's claims. However, something that occurred on this date appears to have convinced him that Crane's discoveries were genuine and that they represented something far more significant than simple archaeological finds. November 5th. Matthias finally agreed to show me the cave system he has been exploring. What I saw there has shaken my understanding of this region's history and raised questions about the nature of the people who inhabited these hills before recorded settlement. The caves are extensive, with chambers that show clear evidence of long-term human habitation. The artifacts Matthias has collected represent only a tiny fraction of what remains in those underground rooms. Thornfield's description of the cave system suggests a complex of underground chambers that had been modified by human activity over an extended period. According to his account, the caves contained evidence of sophisticated engineering, with water management systems that controlled drainage and airflow, and living spaces that had been carefully designed to provide comfort and security for their inhabitants. November 6th. The cave paintings are unlike anything I have ever seen. The images depict not only animals and hunting scenes, but astronomical events, geographical features of the region rendered with map-like precision, and human figures engaged in activities that I cannot interpret. Most disturbing are the paintings that appear to show the caves themselves. with detailed representations of chambers that extend far deeper into the earth than Matthias and I have been able to explore. The journal entry for November 7th reveals that Thornfield's exploration of the cave system had convinced him that Crane's claims about the significance of their discovery were accurate. However, rather than sharing his partner's enthusiasm for revealing their find to the outside world, Thornfield had concluded that the knowledge they had gained posed dangers that neither man was equipped to handle. November 7th. After seeing the